Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Chris and welcome to Lesson 8. In actual fact, today's lesson is the final lesson in our series together. And what I thought I'd do today is work on each of the three pieces that we've been studying together and give you more of a sense of a general overview of each piece. I'm going to discuss some ideas with you about the context of each piece, what the music means, and also be going through a few of the challenges that we've been practicing on over the last few lessons. Now, if you've been with me for the last few lessons, you'll know that each piece has been divided up into small sections which we've worked on together. So today, it's time to put it all back together and to listen to the piece as a whole. And by the way, if you haven't got the music book yet, it's a really good opportunity to do so. Of course, all our pieces come from the ABRSM Grade 1 lists, 2 from the book, and also a third one, which of course you can download from the online shop. So the first piece we're going to do today is Parson's Farewell. Now think back to the first lesson where we started this particular piece, and you may remember that I explained that this piece was a dance. It comes from a long time ago, back to Elizabethan times. And it's a really good idea whenever you're playing a piece of music or studying a piece of music to consider where it comes from. Not only who wrote it, but also why was it written in the first place. And today what I've done is I've thought of a few hints and tips for each piece. And my first hint and tip for Parson's Farewell is to think about the context of the piece. And I've put down here, read the write-up. What does that mean? Well, the write-up is actually what you'll find at the bottom of the music. We've got all the printed notes, but lower down here we have just a couple of lines about what the piece is, and I thought I'd read this to you. It says, this piece is a traditional English country dance for couples. It was published by John Playford, a 17th century London music publisher, in the English Dancing Master, 1651. So a long time ago. One of his most well-known collections of music. And the write-up also says, in the exam, the repeat should be played. Okay, well that's important to know. Remember last time we looked at the repeat in Parson's Farewell, and we realised that that made the music a lot longer. So this is a dance, and what I thought I'd do is play it for you, and give you a sense of what you should be aiming for. Okay, so this is Parson's Farewell all the way through, I think, for the very first time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that's the piece all the way through. Now, don't worry if for you it's still work in progress. That's just to give you an illustration of perhaps what you're aiming for. You might need a few more weeks of practice on that to make it work, but that's generally, I guess, where you'd aim to be. So context is really important. Hopefully you could hear there that it was a dance. It was quite a lively, animated piece. But of course, there are other things in there to watch out for as well. The next thing I've written down here is tempo. Now, in lesson number 7, we had a question about, well, just how fast should this piece be? I played it quite quickly there, but there are a few clues. The main clue is at the beginning of the piece. It says lively. It also says crotchet equals C138. What does that mean? Well, remember from last lesson we said that crotchet equals 138 is the tempo of the piece. Now, if you have a metronome, which is something that musicians use to judge the speed of a piece, I've got one here built into my piano. you can get a really good sense of exactly what 138 actually sounds like. So let's try this. On my digital piano here, I've got a metronome button, and I choose the tempo by dialing it in using some keys here. So I'm going to hold down metronome, and I'm going to press 1, and then 3, and then 8, like that. Now if I press the metronome button again, I will get, okay, now that's my speed. That's 138. So now I can try and have that in mind. And let's try and play the first part again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so yes, it's lively. And would you necessarily be marked down if you played that for an exam, for example, and it wasn't exactly at 138? No, is the answer. I guess what we're aiming to do here is to convey a general sense. If the piece is slightly slower than that, but it's still fairly lively and it's still got a bit of animation in it, that would be fine. Of course, if you're playing for your own purposes and your own amusement, then as long as you play something fluently and you're enjoying it, that's all that matters. But ideally, we should be aiming for a nice, lively tempo. Next up is rhythm and rests. Okay, well, we've done a lot of clapping of the rhythms in this piece, haven't we? But what I thought I'd do is just highlight the first two lines. If you have a look at the music, you can see that in the left hand we have lots of rests, and these do make a big difference to the piece. It does change the quality of the left hand particularly. If I play perhaps the first line and I don't observe the rests, I end up with this. Still sounds fairly correct, but I guess if you're dancing, you're not going to really be sort of that heavy on your feet, are you? If your left hand is pretty much being the underlying pulse of the music and giving it lots of character, you want that left hand to be fairly nimble. Let's try and observe the rests and listen to the difference in the sound. 1, 2, ready, go. So you can hear there that observing the rests makes a huge difference to that left hand. It gives us another sense of the bounce and lively quality of the music. So rests are really, really important. Watch out for that. The rhythms in this piece are always changing. And when you're practicing this piece, if you're still in the early stages, it's really helpful perhaps just to focus on a first maybe 1 or 2 bars at a time. Don't try and play all the way through. Really make sure that what you're playing is rhythmically correct. Remember that a lot of the time when we were looking at new material and new parts of the piece, we'd often think about clapping the rhythms that we saw first without going to the keyboard and trying to play the keys. And that's really important. If you can understand and be accurate with the rhythms first, it's going to make it so much easier when you come to try and find the keys. So rhythm and rests in this piece, very, very important. Dynamics and articulation are also crucial, I would say. If you have a look in this piece, there is a lot of articulation and dynamics. What does articulation mean? Well, do you remember, again, a few lessons ago now, we looked very carefully at the phrase marks. For example, if you have a look at the first page, well, the first line, I should say, we have quite a lot of phrase marking there, and they make a big difference. Let me show you a little bit about this. So I'm going to play the first line just with the right hand, and I'm going to first of all play it as it's written. I've got to make sure that I put in staccato notes, for example, in bar 3. And I'm also going to try and make sure that my phrasing is really well defined. Now what that means is where I've got slurs, phrase marks over the top of the notes, I'm going to join all the notes that are within that phrase mark. So for example, the first bar should sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And did you notice how after I played that second beat D, the D was actually a little bit shorter? That was to give a little bit of a gap between the first phrase and the second phrase. So now I'll play you the whole of that first line, just with the right hand, and listen out for my phrasing. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that makes a big difference. If I forget all that, I end up with something that sounds okay, but maybe not quite as crisp and as entertaining. So that was correct-ish. The notes were right and the rhythms were okay, but there was no articulation. I didn't shorten the last note of every phrase like I did earlier to make it a little bit clipped and to give it a bit more of a sense of separation between the musical sentences. That's a great way of actually thinking about phrases, thinking about them as musical sentences. At the end of a sentence, there's a little bit of a gap before the next one. And that's really what we're trying to encourage here in the music. As well as articulation, of course, dynamics, louds and softs. So how about if I play the piece again and I'll talk you through the dynamics in this piece. So we begin, if you have a look at the music, MF. Now last week we said MF meant mezzo forte, which means medium loud. So I'll talk you through the dynamics as I play. Starting off mezzo forte, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and. Now piano. Forte. Mezzo forte. Crescendo. Piano. Mezzo forte. Crescendo. And you can also hear right at the end there the tempo slowed down because it had to tell the dancers that that was the end of the dance. That's where they would stand opposite each other, perhaps, and bow. Okay, again, paint the picture. You know, music is often considered to be painting by sound. So, you know, think about the end. What would the dancers do? The dance would gradually slow down to give people the cue that now is the time to stop. Did you also hear there that there were loads of dynamic contrasts? And again, it's important if you can try and put a few of those in as well. It gives the music a lot of character. Our second piece today, of course, is Salley Gardens. This is a really, really different piece. So I'm going to turn to it in my book here. And also, I've got some notes prepared. And the first note is the same as our first note in Parson's Farewell. It's about context. It's about read the write-up. What does it say about this one? Well, I can see here that it's actually a poem down by the Salley Gardens. It's by an Irish poet, W.B. Yeats. They've actually printed the poem here, which I think is a really great idea because it gives you a sense of a picture that you're trying to convey, again, through music. There's a little note here from the arranger, David Blackwell, and it says, to begin with, press the left-hand notes down silently, indicated here by diamond-shaped note heads. Yeah, we've been doing that, if you remember. And then start the melody when you're ready. Listen to the tune and make it as beautiful as you can. Imagine you're a singer. Okay, and we've talked about that too, haven't we? How the quality of this piece should be like a song. So I'm going to play it for you, have a listen to this, and then I've just got a few last hints and tips to make your version even better. So let's hold down those notes silently, and then here we go. 1, 2, 3. It's a beautiful piece, isn't it? Really, really nice. And one of the things that I do find useful is just to practice the right hand. And when you come to the end of a phrase, for example, let's have a look at the first couple of phrases at the beginning. I find it's quite nice to make sure my last note of the phrase is perhaps a little bit softer than the others. Let me show you what I mean. So in the first phrase here, we've got this. Now, did you hear that that last note, the G, was a little bit softer? Have a listen again. That's quite nice. It kind of gives like a nice rounded sound to the end. So I'm going to use that technique of making the last note of a phrase a little bit softer in this piece. And I'm going to experiment. I'm going to see what it sounds like if I do that maybe for the first couple of lines. Dynamics play a really, really big part in this piece, and you'll notice that in this particular piece there are loads of crescendos, and also at the very end, of course, we've got the dim marking, and that's short for diminuendo. We did cover that in lesson 7. So we've got a general fade out towards the end. Now, dynamics in this piece are really, really essential, I would say, to get across that expressive, lovely lyrical quality. Another few things to think about again is which hand is more dominant, just like we thought about in Parson's Farewell. I think it's fairly safe to say that in Salley Gardens, the right hand is the one we need to be making sure we've got plenty of space to project in. What does that mean? Well, it means actually the left hand shouldn't be too loud. With the piano, the most resonant and rich part of the sound comes from round about middle C, down an octave. So this part here is the richest, most broader sound. Now that's the left hand part, and we've got to be really careful about that, because if we overplay our left hand, we end up with this sort of sound. Okay, and that's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but the effect, of course, is to overdo the left hand so we don't hear the right hand. So balancing in this piece is very, very important. I'm going to play the piece, maybe the first half again, and listen to the balance between my left hand and my right hand. I'm going to try and make sure that that right hand, it projects over my left hand. So my left hand is softer pretty much throughout the piece. Okay, well, I got carried away. I played the whole piece, but hopefully you can hear two things there: dynamics and also the balance between the hands. My right hand was stronger than my left. I guess also it's worth mentioning at the very end there the rallentando. You can hear again, perhaps just like Parson's Farewell, we gave a really strong indication that the music was coming to a natural resting point by slowing down. And when you finish a piece of music, it's really important to think about how you stop. I guess just like when you're driving a car. If you just slam on the brake pedal, the chances are that whoever's inside the car and maybe the car behind you is going to get a bit of a shock. When we're musicians and we're playing music, it's important to keep in control all the time. And when you're finishing a piece of music, if the music says ral or rit, they're both short, of course, for rallentando or ritardando, slow down. It's important that we control that idea. One of the best ways of doing that is actually to record yourself playing and listen to how you slow down. It should be a gradual slowing down, not a straight stop. Well, I hope those tips have helped you with Salley Gardens and given you a flavour as the overall kind of character. We've got one more piece to play, and that's, of course, Sunshine Through the Trees. Now, this piece for me is really, really interesting. It's different. The first difference being there is no importance of one hand over another. I'm going to play it for you and listen and watch and see how the two hands cooperate with each other and work together to produce a lovely effect. You may remember that a few lessons ago I showed you a picture of sunlight coming through the trees. Context, again, really, really important with this piece too. We haven't got a tempo marking, we haven't got crotchet equals whatever, and this one that gives us plenty of flexibility because we can choose how fast or how slow we like to play this. We've got one word that says flickering, and we can use that together with the image, of course, that we remember from a few lessons ago. Think of lying in the forest, looking up. It's a beautiful summer's day, and the sunshine is just coming through the trees, and you get that lovely effect of the sunbeams coming through the shade. Quite magical. So have a listen to this. Don't forget, of course, for this piece, you need to use your sustain pedal and hold it down throughout the piece. It's a beautiful piece, isn't it? And did you see how both hands work together? And one of the challenges of this piece is being able to move your hands up and down the octave, as we've been practicing in the last few lessons. And I guess also it's worth saying that this piece is, in some sense, the complete opposite of a dance. The pulse, the tempo of the music, as you probably heard there, changed a bit. We had pause marks in bar number 7. They're important. Did you hear how the music seemed to suspend itself for a time? And then, of course, it moved further on. And also, phrasing is very, very important to observe. Again, I mentioned earlier on about phrasing. I said it was a musical sentence. And it's the same sort of thing here. If I play you again from maybe bar 4, those curvy lines make a huge difference. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So each time I began a new phrase, it's a sense of a new sentence, something new that perhaps isn't joined to the previous sentence. With this one, it's a really, really subtle effect. What you need to be really thinking about is where the last phrase ends and the first one begins. And wherever you see a beginning of a phrase, try and perhaps put a little bit of an emphasis on your music, but only slightly on that first note. So we talked about tempo. Did you also notice what happened at the end? That was our work for lesson 7, of course, wasn't it? Where we had the changing time signature in bar number 18. Accel meant to speed up, and ritardando at the very end there, of course, meant to slow down. This piece is a really, really beautiful descriptive piece. So we've talked about contexts. We've said that the hands are pretty much cooperating with each other. There's no one that's more important than the other. And also dynamics. There are some dynamic markings in here. Generally, it's a quiet piece. Again, it's a very peaceful forest. It's a lovely descriptive piece. Well, I hope those hints and tips are useful, and I hope hearing those 3 pieces all the way through is going to help you learn your versions. And don't forget, of course, once this video is finished, you can always rewind and have a listen as many times as you like. And as you'll know, in these sessions, we've been very, very fortunate to have our examiner from the ABRSM, Russell, giving us a few hints and tips about what to do for a performance exam. Well, this week, Russell and I got together and had a video chat, and I asked Russell a few questions that we've been having through our Facebook and YouTube channels about the exams. Russell was really kind enough to be able to answer all of our questions, and this is what happened earlier on this week.
Hi Russell, thank you ever so much for coming on and answering a few questions for us. I thought what we'd do is we've had a few questions sent in by obviously viewers to these lessons. Would you be kind enough to answer a few questions that we've had?
Yes, of course, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, so the first one we've had is a little bit about the qualifications themselves, so the exams. We've had the question to say, are these exams real qualifications, and what do you get at the end?
Yes, absolutely. They're fully regulated qualifications which are recognised worldwide. So what do you get? Well, you get a mark out of 150, and you get a digital mark form sent to you with all the feedback that the examiner has written. And everyone who passes gets a printed certificate as well. But I think it's important to remember that it's not just a qualification, although that's great to have. It's a goal, it's something to work towards, hopefully something really inspiring to progress towards, and it's great feedback from an expert musician. You also, of course, have in the process created a little program of 4 pieces that you can play to your friends or family, so you can share your music making with others.
Great. Okay, so we have 4 pieces, and each one of those pieces is assessed. We get a mark for each of those pieces. there's also an extra element, isn't there, as well, called performance as a whole, which I know you spoke about last week. Can you talk a bit about how that particular section is marked, please?
Yes, absolutely. Without sort of giving you too much technical details, we're essentially listening for three things. This sense of communication, that's the first one. And what that really means is you as the performer communicating your music to your listener, and your listener in this case is the examiner. So how involved are you in the performance, and is it a very small performance just to yourself, or is that sense of performing to an audience, again the examiner? Interpretation is the second thing, and this is about you as the performer connecting with your music. Are you bringing it alive? Are you capturing the different characters in the different pieces that you're performing? And lastly, we're listening for this idea of delivery. And what that really means is you as a performer, how well controlled is the performance? Are you managing your instrument well? Are you kind of responsive to the fact that this is a performance? And are all the challenges in the music being overcome? So it's those things that we're listening for.
Okay, great. Well, thinking a bit about how to record the exam, do I need any extra equipment, any special recording equipment to make it work?
Certainly not. This is not something to worry about at all. Any modern day smartphone, laptop or tablet will be able to do recording to a sufficient quality for the purposes of what we need for a performance grade exam. There's loads of guidance and help on exactly how to do this on the ABRSM website, but don't worry about it. That's really straightforward.
And if the audio quality isn't quite as I'd like it, will I get marked down for that in the exam?
Definitely not. This is not something to get anxious about at all. Examiners are incredibly skilled at working out what is down to the audio quality and what is actually connected with the performance itself and what the person playing is managing to achieve. You know, what you have to remember is that examiners, we've all done thousands of live face-to-face exams where we've been in different rooms with different acoustics, with different pianos, with different candidates playing different music. So we're very well attuned to this idea of, you know, separating out what's going on in the room, as it were, from what's happening in the actual performance. And the same applies here with performance grade exams. So don't worry about that at all.
Okay, so I've got my phone set up. I sit down and I record my 4 pieces. If I'm not happy with those 4 pieces, can I record them again?
Yes, absolutely. You can, if you want to, record it as many times as you like. I think it might be important to remember, though, that the more times you record it, the more anxiety and tension is going to creep in. And then actually, you know, you might start making mistakes. So often the first or even the second take will be the best one. The only thing that's really important to say there is that the final video that you submit has to be done in 1 take. So you can't edit it and say, well, this is the best version of my first piece and here's the best version of my second piece. If you do want to keep doing it a few times, might be a good idea to kind of come back to it when you're fresh, so you know, later in the day or maybe the next day. But yeah, if you want to, you can do it as many times as you like.
That's great, thank you. So we've actually been studying 3 pieces together, and of course we actually have to do 4 for the exam. Any hints and tips on how to choose that 4th piece and perhaps making sure it's the right level?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that you want to choose a piece that you really enjoy playing and enjoy listening to. If you're working with a teacher, they'll have loads of ideas and that they'll be able to guide you towards a piece that's the right level and that suits you. But of course, you can always browse sheet music shops. You could do that online or in person when we're able to go out to shops again. And you can look for, you know, they'll have a huge range of music available. As a tip, there's lots of anthologies that are put together for an appropriate grade level. So, you know, there'll be a book for kind of grades 1 to 2 pieces and grades 3 to 4. So they're a good place to start. But you could always pick your 4th piece from anywhere else on the syllabus for that grade. So, you know, you've got your first piece from list A, one from B and a third from C, and then you've got the full syllabus of all those lists available to pick your fourth one from if you so wish. We've actually written a blog about this, which we can put in the comments below this video.
So, as a music examiner and of course a professional musician, do you have any hints and tips for preparing the recording?
Yes, I think the first thing is to think about where you want to record. Is it going to be at your house or your teacher's house? So, you know, the best place for you. It needs to be somewhere that's quiet without interruptions. And I think it'd be a good idea to have a run through before you do the final take. It would be awful if you kind of, you know, do your really perfect performance and then you've forgotten to hit record or something. You know, that would be really upsetting. So just check all the recording equipment is working. I think one more thing to say is enjoy it. You know, this is a really enjoyable, fun thing to do as well. So if you enjoy it, that enjoyment will enhance your performance and that will come across to the examiner. And I think it's also important to say here that examiners really enjoy doing these performance grade exam assessments. And what we really particularly like is seeing people engaging with music. So, you know, if you're enjoying it, then they will enjoy the performance as well.
And just thinking about once you've got the phone set up and you're making the recordings, is there anything from an exams point of view that you have to show in the recordings? I mean, I would have thought perhaps the keyboard and the fingers on the keys is important, but are there any other considerations that we should have?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So what we want in the picture is the whole of the keyboard from the lowest note all the way to the highest note. And if possible, try and get the pedals in there as well, if you're using pedals for the pieces that you're playing. The film itself can be made in either portrait or landscape mode. Both are absolutely fine. And the very best angle is kind of from the side. So looking onto the piano and you as a performer from the side.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, I noticed as well that there's a lot of hints and tips on the ABRSM Performance Grades website as well. So I guess if there's any other questions or queries you might have, the best place to have a look is on there because there's lots and lots of videos and things on there. Actually, mentioning the website, can you tell us a bit about when and how do you go about booking the exam?
Yes, of course. So exams run every month. You just need to book 1 month before you're ready to upload the final video. Don't forget, you can actually record that video at any time. So that's absolutely fine. You just need to upload it by the date that you booked. The way that you apply for the exam is you set up an account with ABRSM and you enter online. As you rightly point out, there's loads and loads of information on the ABRSM website about exactly how to do this, but those are the kind of main points, I think.
That's great. Thank you very much. Now, of course, in these lessons, we've been using my digital piano here. If you've got a digital piano like me at home, can you still use that for the exams?
Yes, that's totally fine. It just needs to have a few things. So it needs to have a recognizable piano sound to it. It needs to have a touch-sensitive keyboard with fully weighted keys, and has to have an action that kind of matches a conventional piano, including pedals when and if they're needed. But yeah, absolutely, digital pianos, no problem at all.
That's great. And Russell, thanks ever so much. I must say, to have had you, talk to us and give us advice for every lesson so far this series has been really useful. And it's not often that we get insights like that from an examiner. And I really feel that's helped an awful lot in terms of preparation for these exams. So thank you ever so much. Is there anything else that you feel, we'd like to mention before we finish up?
Oh, thank you very much, Chris. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for letting me have a couple of minutes at each of your wonderful lessons. I hope that your audience are feeling inspired to take one of these performance grade exams at some point in the future. And I know I've highlighted it already a few times, but If they have any more questions or things they want to find out, it's all on the ABRSM website, on the ABRSM Facebook page, and we also have a YouTube channel as well. So all the information can be found there. But thank you very much.
Thanks once again, Russell, and it's been really, really valuable having an examiner with us in these online lessons. Well, I hope that's encouraged you to have a go at a performance exam, and certainly all my students that have done so far have found the whole experience really, really worthwhile. Now is a great time to try because the ABRSM have offered a 25% discount on the exam fee to all viewers of this video. If you're based in the UK and you'd like to have a go at an exam in 2021, all you need to do is email sales@abrsm.ac.uk and they'll give you a special discount code that you can use when you book your Grade 1 piano performance exam. And just mention Dr. Chris in the subject line. Casio UK also have a special discount offer to anybody that'd like to buy a CDPS 90 digital piano or an AP260. Now you may remember that I tried a CDPS 90 a few weeks ago and absolutely loved it. Really, really great. If you buy either of those two instruments, you can receive a 50% discount on your exam fee. So well worth having a look at info.casio.co.uk/ABRSM. Well, from me for now in this series, it's goodbye. I hope you've enjoyed these lessons. It's certainly been a great privilege and a pleasure presenting them to you, and I hope you've discovered some great music along the way. So it all remains for me to wish you the very best of luck in your exams, and I'll see you soon.